Chapter 1, The First Encounter. Samantha, a driven young woman with flowing blonde hair and piercing blue eyes, ran a small boutique cafe in the heart of the city. A dedicated and passionate businesswoman, she had built her customer base from scratch, working tirelessly to cater to the busy lives of office workers and students who frequented her place. Her cafe had become a local favorite, known for its artisanal coffee and a warm, inviting atmosphere. A few blocks away, Nia, a determined and fierce woman of African descent with braids cascading down her back, had also opened a business, a trendy fitness studio that catered to the busy professionals in the area. Nia, like Samantha, had poured her heart and soul into her business, using her charisma and energy to create a tight-knit community. Her clients adored her because of her genuine care for their well-being and her infectious enthusiasm. Both women had no idea of each other's existence, but their businesses catered to a similar clientele, busy professionals seeking a break from their hectic lives. Their worlds were bound to collide sooner or later. Chapter 2, A Misunderstanding in the Making. It started with subtle shifts in their businesses. Samantha began noticing that some of her regular customers were visiting less frequently. In casual conversations, she overheard them talking about Nia's fitness studio. At first, Samantha didn't think much of it. After all, people needed to stay fit, right? But as the weeks went on, Samantha's cafe began losing more customers to this new business, or at least that's how it felt to her. Tension simmered within her, and she began to feel as though Nia's business was stealing her customers. Samantha became increasingly frustrated, feeling like all her hard work was slowly slipping away. On the other side, Nia was noticing a similar trend. Some of her regulars had started skipping classes, often choosing to linger at nearby cafes instead of coming in for their usual workout sessions. Like Samantha, she didn't see the other business as a threat at first, but as the pattern continued, she grew irritated. In her mind, Samantha's cafe was luring away her loyal customers with the promise of indulgence instead of health and fitness. The two women, unknowingly spiraling into a state of mutual frustration, began harboring resentment toward each other. Each viewed the other's business as a direct competitor rather than a complementary service in the busy lives of their shared customers. Chapter 3, Sparks Fly. One sunny afternoon, the street outside both businesses was bustling with activity. Samantha was heading out to deliver some coffee to a corporate office, while Nia was running a boot camp class in a nearby park. As fate would have it, their paths crossed at a busy intersection just outside Nia's fitness studio. Samantha, in a hurry and slightly frazzled, didn't notice Nia as she walked out of her studio, and the two collided, spilling Samantha's coffee all over both of them. Samantha gasped, visibly upset, while Nia, drenched in hot coffee, was in shock. What the hell? Samantha yelled, her temper flaring as the hot coffee soaked through her shirt. Watch where you're going. Nia, still in shock from the scalding liquid, immediately responded, her own frustration from the weeks of customer losses surfacing. Me? You're the one who wasn't paying attention. You think you own this street or something? Tension crackled between the two women as bystanders watched, curious about the escalating scene. The simmering frustrations that had been brewing for weeks finally boiled over in the form of a shouting match. Insults were hurled, and the situation quickly spiraled out of control. Both women felt justified in their anger, each believing the other was responsible for their respective business woes. I know what this is about, Samantha spat. You've been stealing my customers, haven't you? Your stupid gym is taking away all the people who used to come to my cafe. Nia's eyes widened, and she took a step forward, her face filled with disbelief and fury. Stealing? You think I'm stealing from you? Your cafe's the one ruining my business. People come here to stay healthy, not to gorge on sugary drinks. The confrontation became more heated, and it seemed like things were going to escalate further. However, the loud argument had drawn the attention of a nearby police officer who quickly intervened, stepping between the two women before things could get physical. All right, ladies, calm down, the officer said, raising his hands to de-escalate the situation. What's going on here? Both Samantha and Nia, still fuming, tried to explain their side of the story, but it quickly became apparent that neither one of them was actually listening to the other. The officer, sensing that this was more about hurt pride than actual wrongdoing, asked them to sit down and talk things out calmly. Chapter 4, The Conversation with the Officer Mediating. Samantha and Nia reluctantly sat down on a nearby bench. At first, the conversation was tense and filled with defensiveness. Samantha accused Nia of trying to undermine her business, while Nia fired back, claiming Samantha's cafe was sabotaging her fitness studio's success. But as they talked, something surprising happened. As the officer encouraged them to explain their frustrations more fully, they began to realize that they weren't actually each other's enemies. In fact, many of the assumptions they had made about each other were based on misunderstandings. "I thought your gym was taking my customers away," Samantha admitted, her voice softening. "But now that I'm thinking about it, people go to your studio to get fit and healthy. Maybe I should have been offering them something healthier at my cafe to complement that." Nia nodded, her expression also softening. "And I thought your cafe was making people skip my classes, but maybe they just needed a break now and then. Not everyone can commit to fitness all the time." As the tension between them eased, both women realized that their businesses could actually work together rather than compete. They shared many of the same customers, and rather than fighting over them, they could create a partnership that benefited both businesses. Chapter 5, A New Partnership. Over the next few weeks, Samantha and Nia began collaborating. They held joint events where customers could enjoy a workout session at Nia's studio, followed by a healthy snack or smoothie at Samantha's cafe. They even started offering cross-promotions, with discounts for customers who frequented both businesses. Their customers loved it. They appreciated the sense of community that both women had fostered, and soon, business was booming for both the cafe and the fitness studio. Samantha's cafe added a line of health-conscious menu items, including protein shakes and energy-boosting snacks, while Nia's studio introduced relaxing coffee breaks after high-intensity workouts. Samantha and Nia also developed a close friendship in the process. They realized that, despite their different backgrounds and personalities, they had a lot in common. Both were passionate, hard-working women who cared deeply about their businesses and their customers. Chapter 6, The Happy Ending. Months after their initial confrontation, Samantha and Nia reflected on how far they had come. Their businesses were thriving, their customers were happy, and they had both grown as individuals. What had started as a misunderstanding based on fear and insecurity had turned into a powerful partnership and a lasting friendship. They often laughed about that day at the intersection, realizing how silly their fight had been in hindsight. They were grateful that the confrontation had led them to see the bigger picture, that they were stronger together than they were apart. In the end, their story became a symbol in the community, showing that cooperation and understanding could overcome even the most heated rivalries. And as they continued to grow their businesses side by side, Samantha and Nia knew that they would always have each other's backs. Chapter 7, A Community of Support. After their joint events gained popularity, Samantha and Nia realized that their success was also inspiring others in the community. Small business owners around them started to take notice of how the two women had turned their rivalry into a successful collaboration. It didn't take long before other entrepreneurs approached them for advice on building partnerships and fostering cooperation rather than competition. Recognizing the potential to support their community further, Samantha and Nia decided to take their partnership to the next level. They began organizing regular meetups for local business owners, encouraging discussions around the struggles and successes of running a small business. These gatherings, held in the evenings at Samantha's cafe, became a safe space for exchanging ideas and experiences. Nia and Samantha had become local role models, showing that success didn't have to come at the expense of others. Their community-building efforts gained them even more loyalty from their customers, many of whom were now recommending the cafe and fitness studio to friends, family, and coworkers. Together, they had cultivated a strong sense of belonging in the city, and that atmosphere of camaraderie continued to elevate their businesses. Chapter 8, The Expansion. With their businesses thriving, the two women began to think about expansion. Both Samantha's cafe and Nia's fitness studio had become so popular that they were struggling to keep up with the demand. One evening, over coffee and a healthy salad in the cafe's cozy corner, Samantha proposed an idea. "What if we open a second location together?" she asked, her eyes twinkling with excitement. We could create a shared space, half cafe, half fitness studio. Imagine a place where people could work out and then walk right over to grab a healthy meal or drink without even leaving the building. Nia leaned back in her chair, her mind racing with possibilities. I love that idea. It could be a one-stop destination for busy professionals. Fitness and nourishment all in one place. They spent hours that night brainstorming ideas, coming up with potential locations, marketing strategies, and design concepts. The idea of a shared space seemed perfect for the evolving lifestyle of their customers, people who valued convenience but also wanted to invest in their health and well-being. A few months later, they found the perfect spot in a trendy new development on the outskirts of the city. The location was ideal, easily accessible, with plenty of foot traffic from nearby offices and residential areas. They signed the lease and began working together to bring their vision to life. Chapter 9. Building the dream. Creating a shared space was no small feat. Samantha and Nia faced new challenges as they worked on the design and logistics of running two businesses under one roof. There were moments of stress and tension, but their growing friendship helped them navigate these challenges. Whenever they disagreed, they reminded each other of the lesson they had learned during their first confrontation. Communication was key. As the weeks passed, they worked tirelessly to turn the space into something special. The cafe area, designed by Samantha, was filled with natural light, cozy seating, and lush plants. It exuded warmth and comfort, inviting customers to relax and unwind. The fitness studio, designed by Nia, had a sleek, modern look, with state-of-the-art equipment and a spacious area for group classes. The two areas were seamlessly integrated, with large glass doors separating them, allowing customers to easily transition between working out and enjoying a post-workout meal. When the new location finally opened, the response was overwhelmingly positive. Customers loved the convenience of being able to grab a smoothie or a healthy snack after a workout, and many appreciated the emphasis on wellness that both businesses promoted. The shared space became a hotspot in the neighborhood, attracting not only their existing customers but also new clients who were drawn to the concept of a wellness hub. Chapter 10. Personal growth. As their businesses flourished, both Samantha and Nia experienced personal growth that went beyond their professional achievements. Samantha, who had once been fiercely independent and somewhat guarded, learned the value of partnership and collaboration. She discovered that sharing her success with others didn't diminish her own accomplishments, but rather enhanced them. Nia, on the other hand, had always been confident and outspoken, but her partnership with Samantha taught her the importance of patience and understanding. She realized that working with others required compromise and empathy, qualities that helped her grow not only as a businesswoman but also as a leader in her community. Their friendship deepened as well. They spent time together outside of work, supporting each other through personal ups and downs. Samantha helped Nia when she faced challenges in her family life, and Nia was there for Samantha during moments of self-doubt. Their bond became unbreakable, forged through both the highs and lows of their journey. Chapter 11. The challenge of success. As with any success story, there were obstacles along the way. As their shared space gained popularity, larger corporate competitors began to take notice. A chain of gyms and coffee shops opened nearby, trying to emulate the unique concept that Samantha and Nia had created. The corporate chain had more resources and a larger marketing budget, and soon, they began poaching some of Samantha and Nia's customers. At first, the women were worried. They had worked so hard to build their businesses, and the thought of being overshadowed by a faceless corporation was disheartening. But instead of giving in to fear, they decided to double down on what made their business special: their personal touch, their community connections, and their dedication to customer satisfaction. They launched a series of community-driven events, including charity runs, group fitness challenges, and wellness workshops. These events not only attracted new customers but also solidified the loyalty of their existing clients. People came not just for the services but for the sense of belonging that Samantha and Nia had created. The corporate competitor struggled to replicate the authenticity and warmth that Samantha and Nia brought to their business. In the end, the women's dedication to their customers paid off, and their business continued to thrive, even in the face of stiff competition. Chapter 12. a legacy of collaboration years past, and Samantha and Nia's partnership became legendary in the city's business community. Their shared space had expanded to multiple locations, and they had become mentors to other aspiring entrepreneurs. They were frequently invited to speak at conferences and events, sharing their story of turning rivalry into partnership. They had created more than just a business, they had built a legacy of collaboration, showing that success didn't have to come at the expense of others. Their story inspired countless others to embrace cooperation, not competition, and to see the value in working together. As they stood together one evening, looking out at the bustling crowd in their latest location, Samantha turned to Nia with a smile. "Who would have thought that a spilled cup of coffee would lead us here?" she said, laughing. Nia grinned and shook her head. "I know, right? It's crazy how things turned out." "Crazy in the best way," Samantha agreed, and with that, the two women clinked their coffee mugs together, celebrating not only their business success but the friendship that had grown out of it, a friendship that would last a lifetime. Chapter 1, The Stare That Couldn't Be Ignored. It was a regular Tuesday afternoon when Officer Ethan Marshall first saw her. She stood in the aisle of the convenience store, her long braids falling over her shoulders, looking through the shelves of canned goods as if she were searching for something specific. There was nothing particularly suspicious about her at first glance, but there was something in her eyes, an intensity that Ethan couldn't shake. She didn't look like the regular shoppers. Her movements were too careful, too calculated, as though she knew people were watching. Ethan stood near the entrance, his gaze fixed on her, trying to decipher why she caught his attention. After years on the force, he'd developed a sharp sense of intuition. Some called it paranoia, but it had saved his life more than once. His instincts told him something was off, even if he couldn't put his finger on it just yet. As she moved from aisle to aisle, her eyes darted around, surveying the area. Was she stealing? Scoping out the place for something more sinister? The thoughts ran through Ethan's mind as he adjusted his police belt and radioed in. "This is Officer Marshall, got eyes on a suspect at Corner Mart on 5th. No actions yet, but something's off. Keep me posted." Without waiting for backup, he began to follow her discreetly. He watched as she picked up a box of cereal, examined it, then put it back down. She moved on to the snacks, but again, didn't seem to be buying anything. She was taking her time, too much time for someone with no clear purpose. "Excuse me, miss," Ethan said, stepping forward. She turned around slowly, and their eyes met. Hers were unusual. Dark, yes, but they seemed deeper than that, glowing faintly, reflecting an unnatural light. Ethan felt a shiver run down his spine. "Yes, officer," she replied, her voice soft but confident. Ethan swallowed, trying to shake the strange feeling crawling over him. "Can I help you with something?" She raised an eyebrow, almost amused. "I'm just shopping." "Is there a problem?" There was no smile, no tension. Just calm, unsettling calm. Ethan hesitated, but his gut wouldn't let it go. Something about her wasn't right. "I'm going to have to ask you to step outside with me," he said firmly, but before he could say more, she turned away, ignoring him entirely. That's when Ethan noticed the faint trail of blood dripping from her eyes. His breath hitched. It wasn't a lot, just a few drops, but the sight of it stopped him cold. She was crying blood. Chapter 2, The Woman with the Red Eyes. Back at the station, Officer Marshall couldn't stop thinking about her. He had followed her out of the store, but she had disappeared into the crowd as if she were never there. No one else seemed to notice the blood or the eerie way she carried herself. When backup finally arrived, she was gone. Ethan sat at his desk, pulling up the surveillance footage from the store. He needed to see her again, make sure he wasn't losing his mind. As the footage played, there she was, moving down the aisles, calm, focused. But something was wrong with the recording. Her eyes. The camera couldn't capture them correctly. They were just dark blurs, flickering every few frames as though the camera couldn't keep up with whatever was behind them. "What the hell?" Ethan muttered under his breath, leaning closer to the screen. He replayed the footage over and over, watching her movements carefully. She never looked directly at the camera, but her presence was undeniably unsettling. "Marshall," a voice called from behind, snapping him out of his trance. Officer Jennings, one of his colleagues, stood there, arms crossed. "You good? You've been staring at that screen for hours." Ethan shook his head, trying to clear the fog that had settled over him. "Yeah, just trying to figure something out." Jennings glanced at the screen, then back at Ethan. "You still on about that girl from the store? Come on, man. Maybe you just need some rest. You've been working a lot lately." But Ethan couldn't let it go. He couldn't shake the image of her eyes. That wasn't normal. No one cries blood, and certainly no one just disappears into thin air. "I don't know what's going on," Ethan admitted. "But I've got a bad feeling about this." Jennings sighed, clapping him on the back. "Take it easy, Marshall. Sometimes our minds play tricks on us. If she's really a problem, she'll pop up again." But Ethan wasn't so sure. Chapter 3. The following days turned into weeks, but the memory of the woman with the bleeding eyes lingered in Ethan's mind. He couldn't forget her, couldn't let go of the strange feeling she had left behind. He began to see her everywhere, on the streets, in the grocery stores, in the faces of strangers. Sometimes, he would catch a glimpse of her in his rearview mirror, standing on the sidewalk, watching him with those unnerving eyes that he followed up with local reports, searching for any sign of unusual activity or missing persons that might be connected to her. But there was nothing. It was as if she didn't exist. Then one evening, as he was leaving the station after a long shift, Ethan saw her again. She was standing under the streetlight across the road, her eyes glowing faintly in the dark. He froze, his heart pounding in his chest. This time, he wouldn't let her slip away. Ethan sprinted across the street, dodging traffic as he closed the distance between them. But the closer he got, the more disoriented he felt. The world around him seemed to blur, and his vision started to swim. His body felt heavy, his movement sluggish, as if the air itself had thickened. When he finally reached her, he was out of breath, his head spinning. She didn't move. She just stood there, watching him with those impossible eyes. "You're not real," Ethan gasped, struggling to regain control. What are you?" The woman tilted her head, her expression unreadable. "I'm as real as you are, Officer Marshall." "How do you know my name?" he demanded, his voice shaking. "I've always known," she replied softly. "You've been following me, haven't you?" Ethan opened his mouth to speak, but the words wouldn't come. His head was pounding, and his vision was blurring. The world around him began to distort, and for a moment, he thought he was losing consciousness. But before he could collapse, she reached out and touched his arm. The pain stopped. The world snapped back into focus. And Ethan realized he wasn't on the street anymore. Chapter 4. A forgotten truth. Ethan found himself standing in a dark, cold room. The walls were made of stone, and the only light came from a small window high above. He turned around, searching for the woman, but she was nowhere to be seen. Panic surged through him as he tried to understand what was happening. Where was he? How did he get here? Suddenly, the woman's voice echoed through the room. "Do you remember now?" Ethan spun around, trying to find the source of the voice. "Remember what? Where am I? What is this place?" The woman's voice grew softer, almost sympathetic. "This is where it all began, Officer Marshall. This is where you made your choice." Ethan's heart raced as memories flooded his mind, memories he had long buried. He remembered the night, years ago, when he was still a rookie cop. There had been a raid, a sting operation in a rundown part of the city. The suspects were dangerous, armed, and unpredictable, but there had been a mistake. Ethan had fired his gun too soon, hitting an innocent bystander. A young black woman. She had died in his arms, her blood soaking his uniform, her eyes staring up at him, wide with fear and confusion that it had been ruled an accident. Ethan had been cleared of any wrongdoing. But the guilt had never left him. He had tried to forget, tried to move on, but the memory of her eyes haunted him every night. And now, standing in this strange room, he realized why the woman in the store had seemed so familiar. She had the same eyes. "You can't run from the truth forever," the woman's voice whispered, her presence surrounding him. "You have to face what you did." Ethan sank to his knees, tears streaming down his face. "I didn't mean to. I didn't mean to kill her. It was an accident. I swear," but the woman's voice was unrelenting. "You took a life, Officer Marshall. And now, you must answer for it." Chapter 5, Redemption. Ethan wasn't sure how long he remained in the darkness, the weight of his guilt crushing him. But as the memories washed over him, he realized that the woman with the bleeding eyes wasn't here to punish him. She was here to help him find peace. "I'm sorry," Ethan whispered, his voice shaking. "I'm so sorry." The room around him began to dissolve, and the woman's form appeared before him once more, her eyes softening. "It's time to let go, Officer Marshall. It's time to forgive yourself." As she reached out to him, Ethan felt a warmth spread through his chest. The guilt, the pain, the sorrow, it began to lift, slowly, like a heavy fog dissipating in the morning light. He looked into her eyes, and for the first time, they weren't filled with blood. They were clear, peaceful. "Thank you," Ethan breathed, his heart lighter than it had been in years. The woman smiled faintly, then faded into the light, leaving Ethan alone in the middle of the street. The world had returned to normal. The noise of the city, the cars passing by, the people walking, it all came rushing back, but Ethan had changed. He stood there for a long time, staring at the spot where she had vanished, the tears in his eyes now flowing freely. He had found forgiveness, but more importantly, he had found a way to move forward. And as he walked back to his patrol car, Ethan knew that he would never forget her. The woman with the bleeding eyes had given him a second chance. Chapter 6, The Guilt Never Sleeps. Ethan thought that after his encounter with the mysterious woman, things would change. That he could finally rest. But guilt is not something that fades easily. It lingers, festers like a wound that refuses to heal. Each night, as he closed his eyes, he could still see her, the woman he had accidentally killed years ago. The haunting red eyes of the apparition from the convenience store reminded him that he hadn't fully faced his demons. He had acknowledged them, yes, but that wasn't enough. Each night, the vision of the woman grew stronger. He could hear her voice in the silence of his small apartment, feel her presence in the corners of his mind. Sometimes, he'd wake up in a cold sweat, her name on his lips, though he never knew it in life. He felt her watching him, even when he was alone. Ethan tried to return to work, thinking that drowning himself in the daily grind would ease the burden. But the streets felt different now. The routine stops, the mundane encounters, all of it seemed hollow compared to the weight of his guilt. His colleagues noticed the change. Jennings, always light-hearted, had tried to joke about it. "Marshall, you look like you've seen a ghost, man. Snap out of it." But Ethan couldn't laugh anymore. He couldn't joke about ghosts. Because the ghost of that woman was very real to him. Chapter 7, A New Investigation. One afternoon, after a particularly rough shift, Ethan sat alone in the precinct, nursing a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold. The precinct was mostly empty now, the quiet hum of computers the only sound. That's when Officer Jennings sat down across from him, his face uncharacteristically serious. "You okay, Marshall?" Jennings asked. "You've been off ever since that incident with the woman at the store. What's going on?" Ethan shook his head, unable to find the words to explain the turmoil inside. How could he tell Jennings the truth? How could he explain the visions, the guilt, the impossible feeling that someone, something, was watching him from the other side? But then Jennings said something that caught Ethan completely off guard. "Do you remember that woman from the store?" Jennings asked, his tone low. "The one you said had the strange eyes?" Ethan nodded, his heart pounding in his chest. "She's not the only one," Jennings continued, leaning in closer. "We've been getting reports from other officers. People around the city are starting to see things, people with red eyes, bleeding. Some say they feel watched. It's not just you, man. Something weird is going on. Ethan sat up straighter, his pulse quickening. Could it be? Could there be more like her out there? Was this connected to his guilt, or was it something much larger? Who else? Ethan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Couple of officers from the 5th precinct reported seeing someone just like her last week, Jennings said. Same description. Red eyes. Blood. And get this, they disappeared, just like she did. No trace, no nothing. A chill ran down Ethan's spine. This was no longer just his personal nightmare. Something bigger was happening. Chapter 10, The Confrontation. Ethan and Jennings drove to the outskirts of the city, following the trail of reports that had led them to the abandoned facility. The building loomed ahead of them, its windows dark and shattered, the air thick with the smell of decay. This was the place where it had all begun. As they entered the facility, the atmosphere shifted. The temperature dropped, and Ethan could feel a presence watching them. The walls were covered in old, faded posters and strange symbols. The air felt heavy, like it was pressing down on them, suffocating. Then, in the dim light of the hallway, they saw her. The woman with the bleeding eyes stood at the far end of the corridor, watching them silently. She didn't move, didn't speak. She just stared, her red eyes glowing faintly in the darkness. Ethan's heart raced, but this time, he wasn't afraid. He understood now. She wasn't here to harm him. She was a victim, just like the others. I'm sorry, Ethan said, his voice trembling. I didn't know. I didn't understand. The woman's expression softened, and for the first time, she spoke. None of us did. Ethan took a step forward, but the woman held up her hand, stopping him. This isn't your fight anymore, Officer Marshall. You can't save us. But you can make sure this never happens again. Tears welled up in Ethan's eyes as the weight of her words hit him. He couldn't undo the past, couldn't fix what had been done to her and the others. But he could expose the truth. He could make sure the world knew what had happened here. I will, Ethan whispered. I'll make sure they know. The woman nodded, her eyes glowing one last time before she turned and disappeared into the darkness, leaving Ethan and Jennings alone in the cold, empty facility. Chapter 11, The Truth Comes to Light. Back at the precinct, Ethan and Jennings worked tirelessly to compile the evidence they had uncovered. The documents, the footage, the testimonies from witnesses, it was all there, laid out in black and white. The truth about the government experiments, the red-eyed survivors, and the cover-up that had kept it all hidden for so long. It wasn't easy. There were forces working against them, people who didn't want the truth to come out. But Ethan was determined. He had seen too much, experienced too much, to let this go. He wouldn't let these people be forgotten. The story broke wide open a few weeks later. Newspapers, TV stations, and online platforms were flooded with headlines about the Red Eyes conspiracy. The public was outraged, demanding accountability from those responsible. Investigations were launched, and the abandoned facility was finally sealed off for good. But for Ethan, it wasn't about the headlines. It wasn't about the fame or the recognition. It was about her, the woman with the red eyes, the one who had changed his life forever. She had given him a second chance, and he had used it to do something good. Chapter 12, The Long Road to Redemption. Months passed, and life slowly returned to normal. The city moved on, the public outrage fading as new stories took its place in the headlines. But Ethan had changed. He had found a new purpose, a new way forward. Every now and then, he would catch a glimpse of her in the crowd, a flash of red eyes, a fleeting smile. He knew she was still out there, watching, waiting. And though he would never see her again, not the way he had before, he knew that she was at peace now, and so was he.